Sorry, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tenant Talk Live. Feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. And thank you for joining us today. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Tenant Talk Live. We'll get started shortly. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Feel free to drop where you're joining us from in the chat. Awesome. We have AJ from Wisconsin. We have Beth from California wishing us a happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, everybody. We have Sue from Seattle, Chris from the Samoa County Department of Health Services. We have Ken from Ohio. Hi, Ken. And then we have Rosie from Colorado. Awesome. A lot of geographic diversity today. We have Lainey from Utah, Maria from Central Coast Center for Independent Living in Salinas, California. We have Dawn from Colorado. Hi, Dawn. We have Sarah joining us from Maryland. It's good to see you, or virtually see you again, Sarah. And we have Maria joining us from the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. Awesome. We have Mike D joining us from Lake Forest Park Citizens Commission in Seattle, Washington. Awesome. I'll go ahead and give it just another minute or so before we get started so that we can let folks in. But thank you again for joining us, friends. If you're just joining us now, feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We have Suha joining us from Utah. Awesome. We have Melody here from Texas. Awesome. And we have Joy Letha joining us from Michigan. All right, we'll go ahead and get started for today, but I'll go ahead and just ask my NLHC friends to help me let anybody into the meeting from the waiting room. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us for today's Tenant Talk Live. I'm super excited for this edition. Again, my name is Sid Betancourt, and I am a housing advocacy organizer with the coalition, and I use she, they pronouns. And you're currently joining Tenant Talk Live, where we provide opportunities for tenants and residents to connect with one another, but to also connect with NLHC, share best practices around tenant organizing, and how to get more involved in federal housing policies and advocacy. And so today we're actually going to be hearing from Dee Ross, who is the founder and also the CEO of the Ross Foundation, but he's also involved with the Indiana Tenants Association and the Indianapolis Tenants Union. And so before I bring him on to discuss a little bit more about his work, I really just want to provide some NLHC updates as well. And I'll always begin by sharing our community agreements and putting them on the screen for you all. Amazing. All right, let me know if y'all can see that okay. Awesome. Okay, awesome. So feel free to just review these community agreements again. We'll be using the platinum rules, so just treat others the way they want to be treated. So please just consider how others want to be treated and how that might differ from how you want to be treated. Mute your mic except for when you're speaking. listen with an open mind and empathy. And if you've spoken already, give other attendees a chance to participate. And if you have any recommendations on any suggestions or updates, changes, anything, just feel free to email that to myself at sbetancourt@nlhc.org, or you can also email outreach@nlhc.org. Awesome. And again, this is a reminder that if you're signed up for NLHC emails, you should be receiving an email this Friday called The Connection, which will have all the recap materials from this call, including the recording, the notes, the chat as well. So you can sign up for NLHC emails at the link that Gabby also posted in the chat. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is just we're recruiting members for our upcoming tenant leader cohort for the 2023 and 2024 year. And for those that don't know what the tenant leader cohort is, it's a group of tenant advocates and community leaders with lived experience of housing insecurity who work towards housing justice and racial equity in their neighborhoods and greater communities, and also at a federal level. And NLHC works really closely with this group to inform our policy priorities, just so that they reflect the needs of low-income renters and households throughout the country. And if you're interested in being part of next year's cohort, we encourage you to fill out the form that Gabby just dropped in the chat. And we'll also be having an interest meeting this upcoming Saturday, June 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that link should be able to help you register for that. And then the last update that I have before I turn it over to Mr. Ross will be, we'll be having a additional tenant talk live this month. We were originally going to have one on Juneteenth, but we have that day off. But we do have a really exciting advocacy opportunity coming up, and I want to make sure that you're all a part of that. And for folks who might not know, it was around May 30th, so I think if it wasn't last week, I think it was the week before. But the Federal Housing Finance Agency issued a request for information on how they can create and enforce tenant protections or renter protections for households that live in rental properties with federally backed mortgages. So any like protections that are created by FHFA will cover like a significant share of renters across the country, and it will hopefully put forth a stronger protections for renters everywhere. So we'll have about 60 days to submit comments, and I believe Gabby just put all those links in there. But if you want, you can go ahead and submit a public comment now, but we'll be having a Tenant Talk Live comment party next week, the 12th at 6 p.m. at the same time as Tenant Talk Live usually would be, but we'll just be hanging out, submitting comments. And if y'all have any questions, I'll be here. We'll have NLHC policy staff here to help you out with those comments. But again, there's that registration for the comment party. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to let me know. We'll go ahead and send out the reminder beforehand as well. And that'll be it for me. But again, if y'all have any questions or any suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat as well. And again, we just ask that you stay muted if you're not speaking. But now I will hand it over to our guest for today, Mr. Dee Ross. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the video. Something's going on with my video screen, but I'm here. My name is Dee Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of the Ross Foundation, which oversees the Indiana Tenant Association and the Indiana Tenant Rights Association. We've been around since 2014. We started the first tenant union in 2018, and there wasn't no tenant union in existence in Indiana before we came a be. And if you don't know about the state of Indiana, it's one of 5 states that still says you cannot withhold rent, even if you're living in deplorable living conditions. And also, Indiana is number 2 Indianapolis is number 2 in evictions filing behind New York City. If you know anything about locations, you know New York City is 6 times as big as Indianapolis. And for us to be number 2 in evictions filing, it should send off alarms across America. And so a little bit about myself on how I came to be to doing this type of work is I'm a person with lived experience. I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis on a street called 42nd and Post Road. It has the biggest food desert in the Midwest, biggest homicide rate in the entire state for the last 10 years. Not one library, not one pharmacy, not one public school, and the list go on. No, not one grocery store. And when I started doing this work with the Ross Foundation, our mission is to address uh, removing barriers to resources, services, and wellness programs. And our vision is to end poverty. But when we would go into uh, doing some type of conflict resolution work, we were running to people that had deplorable living conditions, and we wonder why overdoses was increasing in our community, violence was increasing in our community, so many different things, but no one was tackling the root causes of why people are selling drugs, why people are shooting each other. They never got to the root causes of why people are doing the things they do. And so we set out on this journey to address systemic poverty and systemic racism. And housing is healthcare. It's a social determinants of health. It's one of the main pillars to functionality and for making communities thrive, taking them out of survival mode. And one particular incident that happened with me is at 19 years of age, I was unlawfully evicted from an apartment complex and not knowing my rights. They also charged me with damage fees that I did not know about or had no participation in. But back then, it was a blur for me being a young 19-year-old in college. I'm thinking I never been to small claims court. And so when they sent me something to go to some small claims court, I didn't even show up because in my mind, being a young Black man from an underserved community, going to court equates to going to jail. And so I avoided going and didn't know it would hurt me later on. And I was stuck with a $5,000 bill on my credit. And also I was stuck with eviction filing notice on my record for 10 years. And so that challenged me from finding stable housing, having my own apartment, and I had to stay with my mother. And so I got in this fight not just because uh, of it's a desire, is a big need in our state, but because of lived experiences. I know for a fact people with lived experiences are the ones with the solutions. You guys should be leading this work. We all should. And until lived experiences is at the table, we will never have concrete solutions that's going to create concrete results for the longevity of our state or the place, our community we reside in. One particular incident that happened during COVID-19 is I dealt with a elderly Black woman who had to take off of work because her grandchild was sick and she was not allowed to go into daycare. And so a week after taking off of work, the property manager filed an eviction for no pay. And a couple weeks after that, she was evicted from her home. And 1 week after that, she caught COVID-19. And then a few days later, she ended up passing away. And it made me think, if only she was able to stay inside her home during COVID-19, she'd still be alive today. And so this make this work more meaningful, more dear to me, because there's a lot of folks who are underrepresented and taken advantage of across America. And disproportionately Black and Brown residents are impacted the most. And so, but when we think about representation from leadership, from stakeholders, we really don't have that leadership or proper etiquette representation. And so we set out on this journey to start the Indianapolis Tenant Rights Union. And our mission is to create housing justice through empowerment-based education, outreach, leadership development, organizing, and advocacy. We want to create concrete improvements in tenants' living conditions and challenge and transform unjust housing policies and practices. We was able to pass an ordinance to include tenant rights inside leases in the city of Indianapolis. And then 2 weeks later, the state, with a legislation, overrode the ordinance we passed with a law. And for the first time in my life, I was like, wow, is this possible? I did not know how much power state legislators had over city county council. And so that made me think of, okay, well, I can't just bring Indianapolis to the state house, because it's the legislators who are against it are outside of Indianapolis. And I was like, well, I needed to go find folks in their own backyard to get involved in this fight so they could see that it's happening in their own community as well. And so we knew that we had to change laws and legislation, and we just couldn't stay with it on a city level. And so we launched the Indiana Tenant Association because we knew we had to organize every county in the state of Indiana to create the change we wanted to see in our own communities. And for the first time, I was able to engage rural communities. I've never been in rural communities. And I realized that we have so many commonality than what we know. And the closest hospital in some of the rural communities in Indiana is 2 hours away. The closest gas station is an hour away. And they have inadequate Wi-Fi, internet, housing, deplorable living conditions as well. And so what I was able to do was organize rural tenants and urban residents together in suburban and small towns into one collective action. And we organized a housing advocacy day at the State House. And for the first time, there was tenants from all across the state, 200 plus residents, joining in solidarity. And so now not one legislator could say, oh, that doesn't impact my community, because we made sure we had representation from every county at the State House this past session, General Assembly. And it was a beauty to see. And for the first time, tenants felt like they had a voice, they had a platform, and the work was centered around them, not centered around other stakeholders or even the opposition. It was centered around them, their experiences. And this is what we're all about, is uplifting and creating platforms for tenants to have a voice, but also supporting them with the infrastructure and organizing tools they need to be successful in this work. And I was able to enroll them into this vision because I am a person of lived experience. They could see themselves and me. And so doing this work is about relationships, you all. We have to prioritize building relationships and not just seeking numbers. We need to prioritize getting to the root causes and not putting band-aids on things. And we have to prioritize making sure this work is centered around people with lived experiences, because these are the ones ultimately going to tell the stories of why this legislation don't work for them. And so we're continuing this fight and continue to grow. But I would encourage you all to go back to your neighbors and friends and colleagues to let them know the importance of showing up when it counts, showing up when it matters. It doesn't matter if it directly impacts them or not. They are a resident inside your community or state. They are a part of the puzzle. They need to be a part of the fight. It will directly impact them one way or another, whether it's through a neighbor or through a family member, through a friend, or through a client they work with. And so also with the Indiana Tenant Association, we don't just do advocacy work for tenant protections. We have a home literacy course where we help tenants transition from renting to home ownership. We also teach them about their rights, just in case they do not want to own a home. We teach them how to build their credit. We teach them about fair housing violations. And we teach them how to represent themselves inside small claims court. Just in case you can't afford a lawyer, or you think about pro bono lawyers. It's a shortage. They can't be everywhere. And so we have to equip our tenants with much knowledge and tools so they can successfully represent themselves in court. And so we have written letters, we have templates, we have everything ready to go for them to be able to represent themselves. But also we teach them how to collect documentation. We teach them how to provide paper trails, and we teach them how to file inspection with the health department. And so I think all those things are very meaningful steps, but sometimes, it could be a lack of knowledge within underserved communities. And so I would love to open it up for questions due to sake of time, and I'm an open book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dee. And I'll go ahead and open it up to the audience to ask some questions in the chat. But in the meantime, I can also ask some questions while we wait for those to funnel in. But I think the first thing that kind of stood out to me immediately was just the aspect of like taking care of yourself, and how like mental health can definitely be like a major factor in someone like losing their housing, and how when there's not enough resources, that's like another factor to the problem. And so I guess my question is, as we like navigate these broken systems, sometimes folks might have like mental health issues going on, but some people also have disabilities. Some folks have hidden disabilities. Like how like would you, I guess, not encourage, but necessarily like any suggestions or recommendations that you might have for those folks as they navigate like the advocacy sector, knowing that there's like a lot of hard work going on, but there's still like an important case to make for taking care of yourself?
Yeah, self-care is so important, you all. A little bit about myself. I have 2 chronic lung diseases. I had respiratory lung failure twice. Uh, and in 2018, I was in a coma for 7 days, unresponsive. And during that time, I'm writing a book about it. It's called Why Not Me? But it really made me prioritize when I was able to recover the importance of not becoming too selfless. And in doing this work, we can often become too selfless. and not prioritize self-care. And so we have to have a balance of being selfless and self-care and make sure that you stay alive to do this work. Because if you're dead, how can you save anyone else? And I think for me, I do yoga and meditation, but also, I get away, I travel, I shut it down for a week. And the most important thing is I delegate. Building up leaders is so essential and imperative to this work. A true leader is all about building other leaders up to do this work, enrolling them into organizing, enrolling them into your vision, enrolling them into the mission of your organization or program. And if you have that gift and ability, please continue to do that, because you never know when you want to take a break, or take a weekend off. And I know that, doing this work we're always told there's no room, there's no days off, no time to waste. Every minute matters because people are dying left and right, every single second. And I get it. But if we do not prioritize self-care and our own mental health, how can we help anyone else navigate their mental health? And so when we think about what resources is out there for tenants you're serving that's dealing with mental health issues, there's don't just think about the ones that take insurance. Think about the holistic mental health practices that's out there as well. It's not just talk therapy. Like we have our own mental health and wellness center with the Ross Foundation, and we do art therapy, we do reading therapy, we do music therapy, and we do healing circles. Um, we created different avenues for people dealing with housing issues, dealing with their own mental health issues, but also, dealing with food insecurity. We have the biggest food desert in the Midwest. All these different things could be challenging on top of uh, not having a roof over your head. And the thing is, if you set up your organization to be able to have community partners or create uh, overarching programs where it's not just tackling housing, because one thing, if you're dealing with a client, you're dealing with someone, a resident, it's more than housing. It could be a barrier. It could be mental health. It could be unemployment. It could be uh, lack of education. It could be so many different things. So what are you doing to set up your organization to really help that tenant overall come out of survival mode and be put in a better position to thrive? And so that means creating programs within your own network, but also creating partnerships that can help you provide that wrapped around support for that tenant. And so don't become that organization. If your tenant you working with says, I need some toilet paper, and you say, well, we're not a service organization, well, I mean, what harm is it going to do just to provide them with a roll of toilet paper? At the end of the day, we are all human beings, and everyone deserves to live in a humane society and with dignity. And we can never forget that that is the common factor, that we're all human beings, and no one deserves to live in impoverished or deplorable living conditions.
Yes, I agree. And I really appreciate that you said that it's like all the different aspects of life, including the social part. And I also want to just shout out like your organization too, because I saw like on LinkedIn recently that you did like an egg hunt for the kids in your community, but you like dropped them down from a helicopter too. And like I honestly like I can tell like how happy that probably made like so many kids in your community. And it's like those things, not small things obviously, but just like those those moments that like make a big difference. So
Yeah,
um
and we use those community engagement events. We do Easter egg hunts on top of, and we do toy giveaways. We do Easter back to school giveaways, food giveaways, but we use them as hooks because we know we're not going to be able to reach everyone door to door. And so we use them as hooks to draw people out who directly in need, and each one of them have to fill out an intake form, and so we can address the overall need. So we get into the root causes versus putting a band-aid on things. We don't want to serve the same people every single year with school supplies. We want to figure out what's the barrier, what's keeping them from thriving and flourishing, and housing is a big component of that.
yeah, 100%. We had a question in the chat from Sarah Hasmer just asking, well, first she thanked you for sharing your experience and expertise. And then she was just curious how much it costs for landlords to file an eviction in Indianapolis. And from her personal experience in Maryland, it only costs $15, but they're trying to push it to be like a higher amount so that landlords aren't like as incentivized to evict tenants.
Well, good question. Right now, I do not know exactly right off the bat. I know it's very low. I don't know the exact dollar amount, but I will say this is a landlord-friendly state. We are in a red state as well, if you did not know. And a lot of the landlords here are very wealthy. So they are petty enough to take you to court for the smallest things because they know the judges are going to more likely reside with them because of the laws. It is more landlord friendly.
Yeah. And that's definitely hard too. I think even speaking with you like at the forum, which is where we met, I could definitely see like the differences between like DC where I live now and in Indiana too.
Yeah.
There's like two questions in the chat. I'll take those, and then Julian, I'll take you after that. But the next question that I see is from Jessica Rose in the chat. It's kind of like a three-part question, but the first question is, where is the actual best way to report fair housing violations? I think we can probably take that one. But the second question is, what if the owner or landlord is locally powerful? And also, how does one find ways to be a consultant with lived experience in advocating for housing? So feel free to pitch in on any of those, and I'll also try to help out a little bit if you can.
Yeah, can you repeat the second and third one?
Yeah.
Is it in the chat?
Yeah, it's Jessica Rose. She says,
Yeah, I can't see
and
it.
Jessica, if you want to be unmuted too and ask your question live, you can.
Hello. Yeah, I was wondering mostly like how do you report where's the best way, like a fair housing violation or even like a VAWA violation when the landlord is locally very powerful and you really aren't going anywhere when you try to get any advocacy locally.
Yeah, like here in Indianapolis, we have a fair housing in central Indiana. And usually fair housing does well with having associations in different cities and different states. If you could contact your local fair housing association, but also we also have an Indiana Civil Rights Commission that deals with a lot of fair housing discrimination issues. The challenge is they are small. And they only can handle so much workload, and there's no money in the budget to be able to expand their operations and the representation that they have. So that is a challenge, and that I know that's not just here, but all over America is having adequate funds versus investing into building new jails. How about we invest in providing lawyers for every tenant in the state, in your community? And so also how I deal with powerful landlords is powerful landlords do not like to be called out on the news, on social media. We have organized so many different fights where we had every resident, not just that reside in that apartment complex, but we also had residents all across the city of Indianapolis calling in, leaving voicemails and complaints, also calling the news. But also, we found their personal pages on LinkedIn and on Facebook and tagged them. We left bad reviews for property management group. Yeah, we do all of those things. And we left a lot of voicemails on their answering machine. And so we was able to, in 3 weeks, get an apartment complex renovated and sold to better owners. It was an owner that was outside of the state in New Jersey, did not care about the conditions of this apartment complex, and they had mushrooms growing on their walls. They had mold and feces growing on all over their walls, and their ceilings was caved in. So when it rained and snowed, it came straight down the walls, the cracks of their walls, and it was a few homes there that didn't have doorknobs, and they had to use a T-shirt from keeping anyone from trying to open the door at night. And so, yeah, some of this work could be a little radical, but also you have to be strategic, playing chess and not checkers. And whether it's organizing a protest and locking arms and in front of the landlord's property, or making phone calls, or just creating a name, a brand for your organization and movement where landlords don't want to deal with you. They rather try to work it out now. So they know if they create a bad relationship with us, the Indiana Tenant Association, they know that they are more likely to be blasted on the news, more likely to be blasted in newspapers, and they don't want that bad publicity. We have developed enough power, tenant-led power, where they don't want to they don't want to lose any more money.
I love that. Strategically radical.
There you go.
For your answer. Yep.
I like that too. We have a question from Samantha Anderson in the chat, and that kind of goes in hand with something I wanted to ask too, but she's asking, can you pick your top money management skills program? And I guess along the lines of that, just like you were talking about how you teach tenants a lot of different things and offer them a lot of different resources, like how do you find those programs or like those trainings and provide them to folks?
Yeah, so since we oversee the tenant union here, we are the one providing the trainings. And so what we have done was YouTube could be your best friend. Google could be your best friend. And finding other best practices. We do not believe in reinventing the wheel. We research like the Kansas City Tenant Union. It's a lot of pro-tenant movements in California. We learned, we have developed friendships and relationships with the tenant unions in Philadelphia. And we do not hesitate to even fly out there to learn and engage and shadow some of their models. And we know that every city is different and every laws is different. And so what we do is, we take what we can use. We pick what we can use and we make it our own, authentically here. And so, because you got to understand, we're the first tenant union in the state of Indiana. So tenant protection trainings that didn't exist before us. And so we come with a lot of resources far as being able to unite platforms together that usually wasn't united in the first place. So Fair Housing in Central Indiana, Indiana Legal Services, even legislators and the health department. None of those people was talking to each other or working together. And so we learned how to organize all of them to supporting the tenants we represent because they already getting funded. So we might as well hold them accountable to do what they're supposed to be doing in the first place.
And you're getting a lot of like cheers in the chat too, just telling you that you're doing an amazing job. I hope you're seeing those.
Well, sorry,
But
I can't see.
I'll go ahead and hand it over to Miss Julian Jackson if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Two things I wanted to follow up with, unless I missed it. Someone had asked about where one starts. We're doing a lot in Minnesota from a lived experience perspective. And one of the things that I've been wondering about is how and the process for officially, if you will, because I think someone asked about it in the chat from a consultant perspective, so that even with the work that we're doing, we still are looked at a little more seriously, if you will, in terms of the work that we're doing. If you have some thoughts about that, as well as being able to get your information if we choose to move in your direction in terms of getting more information in terms of your knowledge and skills. I hope that
Yeah,
made a little bit of sense.
absolutely. Yeah, we'd be glad to even come and help, with the technical assistance of getting it set up and getting it geared in the right direction. But yeah, I think the first thing is to build relationships. And sometimes we can refocus on building up the program and organization or movement, and we lose sight of building and connecting with the actual neighbors. When you start to have authentic and transparent conversations about issues they see in their community, usually housing is going to be at the top of the chart. Walk them into the solutions that they are seeking in their own community. And so that's what we have the ability and gift of doing is we don't just say, hey, we doing this. No, we hear from our community members issues that is plaguing their community that's directly impacting them. And say if you organize the 10 people with lived experiences and you did a survey or you asked did a questionnaire on issues, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 of them was going to have some sort of housing issue or have had it at one point in time. It doesn't have to be current. And so this is the reason why we need representation for housing and other issues along the spectrum. And so, yeah, I say you start small, enroll them into the vision, help them enroll into their own vision for what a better community looks like to them. And then you're able to build from there and be able to organically have more people come beside you versus forced.
And how do we do that quickly? For example, here in Minnesota, we did successfully with our trifecta, even though we wanted our governor to give us 100 mil in terms of the housing work that we're doing here. He gave us 50 mil. We're trying to figure out how do we quickly figure out how we're going to strategically disperse that and make sure that it gets to those of us that it should get to within the time frame that we have to work in, which isn't on our side, as well as moving forward to make sure that happens. That didn't quite come out the way that I wanted it to. And keeping in mind that this time for the next legislative session, we may not have the trifecta that we have currently, and then all of a sudden it's selective amnesia, if you will, in undoing all of the political things that we put in place currently.
Yeah.
Did that make any sense at all?
Absolutely. Like I said at the beginning of the call, the people with the lived experiences are the ones with the solutions. So you have to meet people where they are. Get outside the four walls, go door to door. We have 20 outreach workers, five on each side of town. going door to door every single day, engaging residents on different issues or concerns they may be having. And then we put together a game plan within 48 to 72 hours. We help them with that concern or issue, whether it's housing, mental health, food insecurity, education, or whatever it may be, transportation. And we help them overcome that barrier. And so you have to, I would say, is you put together a small group to go door to door, engaging folks, and then you organize small committees. Like I would say, churches could be a part of it. Uh, Smaller churches, I say, is more grassroots. That's just my personal opinion, because they are more likely to be residing in that zip code. And just pick, different small group organizations or apartment complexes to meet with, and just engage them. Create a survey, create a questionnaire, and for them to fill out, and just hear from them about issues they would like to see fixed or corrected, but also ask them how would they would like to see the $50 million dispersed.
That was really good, Ms. Jackson. Sorry, go ahead. I saw you.
No, I was just going to say thank you. And then is it possible to also have your info in the chat, Mr. Ross?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Put
We
my
can
email.
drop it in there for you too.
Okay, thank you.
No, of course. So I have 3 folks who have their hands up. We might not be able to get to all of you, and I apologize, but I did see Talmage House raise their hand first. I hope I pronounced that right, but feel free to ask a question.
Thank you, Sid, and thank you, Dee. I always appreciate the tenant talks. My question, I have a couple of questions. We are all mostly from different states, and what is the benefit of joining a state tenant association? I'm gonna let you answer that one first. I'm gonna answer the second one.
What is the benefit of joining a statewide tenant association?
Is there a benefit of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's many statewide tenant associations, but if there are one, if there is one in your state, I would recommend definitely joining, because at the end of the day, not one county or city could change a law alone. And the ability to work with other counties and build relationships with different networks. Say you have one legislator or 2 legislators in a rural community that is just pushing back on creating a rent escrow bill, or creating or emergency rental assistance, or whatever it is. It could be you just showing up with your own county, and they don't represent your county, your district. It's going to be hard to sell them on the reason why you guys need this bill passed. Now, say you bring their county, their own district to the table alongside with you guys, they have lived experiences too, but no one's really ever organizing together all the counties into one collective action, and being on one page, and having one collective voice, and being able to target the legislators they need to target to get the bills passed. I think that's the way I approach it. When I started the statewide association, I didn't know if it existed anywhere in America, but I knew that this was the approach I wanted to have. Now we have rural and urban people, residents talking every single day like brothers and sisters, and it is good. Some of the rural residents have their own farms, and it's taking relationships to a deeper level of connection, and connecting people back to what they used to do pre-slavery.
Thank you for that answer, Dee. And then I want to know, what is the experience with individuals not being renewed a lease after being in a place for so long? Is that common?
Not being able to renew a lease after being what for so long?
after being a resident for so long, or having your or being asked to leave the premises. And I want to respect
That
the time.
that is very common. That is very common. That is one of the issues and challenges that we deal with. Another issue we deal with is the rent increasing. You know, three, you know, just now, I was just talking to a resident who went from paying $900 on a 1 bedroom, and now is being told in 45 days they have to pay $1,200. You know, and so this is someone that's on a fixed income that is receiving Social Security, you know, disability benefits, and so how are they going to be able to come up with the extra $300? You know, and so this is the challenges. Yes, I think you bringing that up is how we continue to push the needle forward. Without people like us at the table, then those conversations are not being had at the State House.
Couldn't that be considered malicious, D, if they know that what the income of the person that's already renting the place, and they intentionally bump it above the 30% of whatever the income is?
Yeah.
Couldn't that be considered malicious?
Absolutely. Rip burning, you know. In certain states, you know, I think California, I think you in California, you know, they are more tenant friendly state, but not in certain areas, or to my knowledge, than Indiana. Compared to Indiana, y'all have way more, y'all have way better laws than what we have here. And so I think that the challenge is, how are they being enforced? How are they being implemented? You know, how are they being following through and honored? Who, you know, who's working together to make sure that these laws that's been passed is being enforced the right way?
Thank you for that, D. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for those questions. I think we'll have time for one more, and I think Mahala Baker was first. So Mahala, the floor is yours, and then we'll wrap up for today. And I apologize to the folks we couldn't get to.
Thank you, Sid. Hi, everybody. My name is Mahala Baker. I'm with Enterprise Community Partners. I'm here located in Georgia. I joined a little late, so I apologize if you have kind of already answered this question, but I was just wondering, so for example, I'm not sure what the tenant protections are like in Indiana. From the sound of it, there's probably limited tenant protections. Georgia, there's also very, very limited tenant protections here. Like there's essentially nothing. And so I was just curious, in the work you do, like how do you continue to, like, what is your experience working with, if you do, like with local government, state government that might not be receptive to your mission, to your cause, and how do you keep progressing forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, you gotta have this model of whatever it takes, no matter what, because if you stop, then, you know, the people that's impacted the most will definitely have to deal with those issues in a different way. And so I stay grounded in doing this work, no matter what. No matter what pushback I get from any legislator. I know this year we didn't reach all our goals that we want to accomplish in General Assembly, but the conversations were started. And I look at that, and for the first time, I was voted on became the first, the youngest Black man and the only Black man and the only Black person to sit on the Indiana Housing Task Force for the state. That is, you know, for some that may be small, but that's a big deal in Indiana. And so we have to continue to push the needle and also highlight those short wins, those small wins. Pat yourself on the back for the small wins, even if you're able to get the mayor out to a town hall, or the governor out to a town hall, or different legislators out to a town hall that they are not usually accustomed to being at. These are success stories. These are the ways. This is how you start to push the needle and drop the seeds into something that's going to flourish in the long haul. You cannot expect direct impact right away. And so you have to be strategic, like I said, radically, right? And also continue to organize and be strategic. So one legislator that I dealt with is I found out that she was an alumni of Notre Dame University. And so I enrolled different professors into our vision at Notre Dame University and got them to support us. And so when I started meeting with her, I talked about our partnership with Notre Dame, with the law students, and how they are helping with the eviction clinics. And it was kind of like, playing chess. She didn't know I did that research on her, and that I knew she was an alumni of Notre Dame University. So now she couldn't go against not hearing me out or potentially entertaining a solution. And now we're working together. So I would say do research on who you want to meet with and be intentional.
Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Dee, for answering all those questions and for being a part of our Tenant Talk Live today. I think a lot of folks were really excited to hear from you, and you're getting a lot of kudos in the chat. So I hope you're checking those out. If not, we'll share that afterwards too. But thank you so much for being a part of our Tenant Talk Live, and thank you to all the attendees who came by today. Oh, there was one question that I wanted to ask really quick, just on the record before we leave. Somebody asked in the chat earlier how you all are funded. I know that's like always a really big question for folks, especially when you're doing amazing work like you are.
Yeah, we started off with funding out of my own pocket at first. I had to start somewhere. And then, in the community donors, individual donors, the community keeps us efficient. We try not to go after every grant because we want to stay true to who we are. We want to stay grassroots. We don't want to, unless the grant come on our terms, we don't go after every grant or every sponsor, because usually you don't want to turn into an organization that you're serving the funding more than serving the people, and filling out paperwork than actually meeting people where they are. And so it's a balance. I will say is I do have colleagues who have went after federal grants through HUD and got funding. I do have colleagues who have got funding through the United Ways, but also just think outside the box, because housing impacts everyone. You think about Nike; they can't get shit. Why would they need shoes if they don't have a roof over their head? Think outside the box about who would you want to engage, and really just be strategic about who you seek out, because their mission has to align with yours, and their vision have to align with yours as well. So look up different organizations that are philanthropic, look at their vision and mission, and make sure their goals align with your goals, and stay true to who you are.
Amazing words. But yeah, thank you so much again, Dee, and thank you everybody for joining us. Just a reminder that we will be meeting next week, Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, to do a comment period party for the FHFA request for information, and we'll drop that link in the chat. But aside from that, I'll let y'all go. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.